Let's Talk London with Jess Brady on Global News Radio 980 CFPL.
Welcome back to the program. If you turn on network news this afternoon, more than likely you're going to see familiar faces and hear familiar voices because officials here in London are commenting, sharing condolences, talking about the circumstances of this heinous attack that occurred in our community last night. This callous and unthinkable act has robbed our community of 4 individuals who were loved by their friends and family, who, by all accounts, made a big difference in this community and also within the Muslim community as well. 4 people have passed away, 2 women, a man, and a 15-year-old girl. A 9-year-old little boy remains recovering in hospital. The community is grieving, and as we just heard from Arij Anwar, interim imam at the London Muslim Mosque, they're receiving a ton of phone calls and emails from people in the community expressing their condolences. And those mean a lot, as the imam said. It shows them that there is support within the community. But right now, it is a time of grieving and shock as well. To think that this happened here in London, it shakes us and makes us question a lot of what we thought to be true, right? And we know that racially motivated attacks, Islamophobia, it happens across our country. And now it has happened in a gut-wrenching way here in London. Joining me on the line to speak about this situation a little bit more is Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Fareed, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I wish with all my heart that we were not having this conversation, but I'm glad that we can connect with each other, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for allowing me to discuss this very disturbing event.
It is, we're adding what's taken place to a list of disturbing and heartbreaking incidents that have happened in other areas, Quebec City, in Toronto, different incidents, not just in Canada, but around the world we've spoken about. And now it's in our home community. And it is a terrible feeling, just awful.
Yeah, well, when I was first told about this, because I got a phone call, I hadn't seen the initial news report, but when I got the phone call and then I started tuning into the news, I just felt sick, and it took me back to how I felt when the news came out about the mass murder at the Quebec City Mosque in January 2017. And I think that's the way that Muslims are feeling across the country right now. And I think there's a lot of families who are sitting down and having a conversation, or will sit down and have a conversation about going out and just going about your business. I mean, these people were just out for a walk. You know, they weren't doing anything. They were just out for a walk. And this man deliberately drove his truck into them and, killed 4 members of this one family and left a 9-year-old boy injured, lying in hospital with injuries. And we don't know what's going to happen with him. So, I'm as a Muslim, I'm feeling very emotional about this, but as a Canadian, I'm feeling outraged because, sad to say, after Quebec City, because of the way politicians reacted to that, or didn't react, frankly, I was anticipating something like this occurring again.
It is... We keep saying, and I'm guilty of it too, I keep saying unthinkable. But as you've said, this is an action, a type of action that we've seen before. And it's You use the word outrage as well, and I think that is the next emotion. Once we get through the shock here locally of what's taken place, that outrage is going to lift off in a big way because this type of violence has no place anywhere, and we certainly don't want this sort of action happening in our own community where people will inevitably feel less safe than they did yesterday at this time, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah. I think all Canadians need to think about the kind of country we want to live in. Do we want to live in a country where people who are motivated by hate get energized online and by things said in public and by, things said by some politicians and right-wing media personalities, frankly? Is that the world we want to live in, or do we want to live in a world where people can live in peace and safety? Because if it's the latter, then all Canadians, regardless of faith, had better start putting pressure on the politicians, on the federal government and their provincial governments to undertake a concerted and aggressive anti-hate strategy. The Canadian government committed funds towards an anti-hate strategy, but it was left to local community groups to apply for that funding and do the work themselves. But this needs more than that. The same way that the government has attacked the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, is the way that governments need to react to the pandemic of hate in this country, not just against Muslims, but against black people, against indigenous people, against Jews, against LGBTQ2 people. It's out there and it's happening, and frankly, I don't think, I'm sick of the words of sympathy, frankly. I am sick and tired of saying we stand with you, and the Prime Minister or the Premier come out and say this has no place in our society, but when they're asked to actually do the concrete thing and step up, they're absent. I'm sick of it.
And understandably so, because it gets to a point where you say the same things, there's the same call to action, and if no action is taken, then what is it all for? And the suffering continues. Yeah. I mean, look what happened with the revelations after the 215 Indigenous children's remains were found. Now, this was news that had been out there for a long time, but something galvanized the public to react, and what happened this week in terms of government action was a reaction to that public response. We need the same type of public response to hate, bigotry, and racism, because unless the people are in the streets, unless they are phoning or emailing their MPs or the Prime Minister or their premiers or their provincial members, unless that is happening, then basically they can just, express their sympathies, thoughts and prayers, and then go on their merry way. And that's the way it's been. Like every time an incident has happened, whichever community has been targeted, thoughts and prayers, they stand in vigils, they come out and stand before a mic or a camera and say how horrible this is and this is not acceptable. But then when it comes to actual concrete action, we get crumbs thrown at us in terms of funding. And then the actual thing they need to do, which is instigate or initiate a national program to fight this in terms of public education, in terms of putting in place the legislative and legal tools and giving police tools to more easily charge hate crimes. That's not happening. That hasn't been happening, even despite demands by various communities, including Canadians United Against Hate to governments. It is a moment where, as you've said, we need to galvanize. We need to feel that same emotion and that idea of we're not going to settle for this anymore. There has to be some kind of concrete action taken. And Fareed, I'm so grateful for your time today, sharing in this conversation. I know there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it. And on a day when you and other members of the Muslim community are grieving, I especially appreciate your time. Thank you for this conversation, and I know that we will have others in the future as well. Well, thank you, Jess, you and your colleagues for covering this. The public does not get the impetus to act without the media being out there to tell these stories and cover these stories. So I want to thank you and your colleagues for doing that. And as this story develops, I'd be more than happy to weigh in on any actions by government or lack thereof. We will definitely be in touch. That is for certain. Until our next conversation, please do take good care of yourself and of your family as well. And our condolences again. Thank you very much. Take good care. Bye-bye. Bye. That's Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate, speaking about what happened here in London and the lives lost. We need to take a break. We'll be back on Let's Talk London on 980 CFPL.